Hi, I'm Amy.
And I'm Debbie. Together we are Tessie Pearl, a community for widows.
Old wounds tend to come up in grief. And what do I mean by old wounds? These are the traumas, the injuries, the things that have been repetitively said to us over the years that really damage us. Our minds and bodies remember and respond to the pain of grief similarly to the way we've responded to difficult experiences and relationships in the past.
How do we know we've arrived at an old wound?
That is a really good question. Sometimes you may feel frustrated or stuck in your grief. And despite society's ways of, making sure that there's a timetable and you should already be done. No, I'm talking about there's this internal feeling of stuck. You also may feel strong emotional reactions. You may lash out. You may have angry outbursts. You may cry uncontrollably. Those are signals that something else might be going on in the background. You also may think all or nothing thinking or black and white thinking, or you may repeat to yourself phrases like, no one is here for me. I can't fix this. This is too much for me. I am not enough. My life is a constant mess. Why am I always helping other people when I'm the one who lost someone and they should be helping me? That's a sign that maybe you're acting on an old wound. But these old wounds are cues that something needs to be addressed. There are many more examples, but these old wounds have emotions, thoughts, and memories attached to them and can show up alongside your grief. We carry old wounds, and grief is a magnifier of them. When you're ready, it's important to take a look at what you're feeling, what you're holding on to, what stories you're telling yourself, and notice and observe if they're hindering you or helping you.
Now, when you talk about old wounds, what are you meaning? What could an old wound be?
Well, we each have conscious and subconscious beliefs, and these came from where we grew up. These are old wounds, mean things that happened when in your childhood, in your early adult years, even a little bit beyond.
So it wouldn't even necessarily be another death or something like it. It's just something that's happened.
Yeah, that have created thoughts and feelings within the body and a narrative in your mind. It could be bullying. It could be abuse. It could be, there's actually so many different things that can cause it. It can be just as simple as, and it's not simple because it created a wound, but rejection and divorce, abandonment, all of those things create old wounds. Like I said, they can happen in our families. They can happen at school when you were young. They can happen in your religious setting with a pastor or belief systems. They can happen in your communities. Any place that you've lived and resided, something could have happened that really cuts deep and hurts. All of these thought processes and conditioning happened at the subconscious level as neural pathways formed over time through repetitive thoughts and behaviors. And some of these thoughts and behaviors, like I said, are helpful, and some of them do not serve you or the people that you love. But the good news that we've talked about is the brain can be rewired, and new thought processes and new lived experiences can rewire the brain and retrain you from thinking. I've seen this in my own life. When I was young, my dad had an affair, and this juncture, it severed the family, and my mom had to start working. And so she went to night school, so she watched the kids. I had 5 other siblings. I was 9 at the time. And so she went to school at night, and I had to make dinner, get the family, all the kids to bed. And then I'd go to sleep and then get up and we'd start again. I'd go to school. She'd watch the ones that were home, and then I'd take over at night. And we only really communicated through this long blackboard in our hallway. And it was just an interesting way to live, but it was a lot of adult responsibility that I had to take on at a very young age. And yet it was kind of celebrated and championed. And I felt good about myself because I could do all of these wonderful and amazing things. At least that's what it felt like, because that's how you process, at such a young age. But as I got into my early 40s, honestly, it was that long that it took me to realize that I had this habit of taking upon myself an unnecessary amount of responsibility and tackling it all and then internally feeling good.
So this was a way of validating you.
Yeah. But it was a learned habit. It was actually a wound. And I realized that it was because almost every time I ended up being burnt out.
In looking back at your childhood, do you feel like you missed out on as being a child?
Oh, absolutely.
So that is a gaping wound.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's many ripple effects from those wounds. But what I learned is this is how it affects my behavior. Okay. I overwork to then help myself feel good about feel good about me and take care of everybody else and minimize my needs to then feel productive and worthy and whatever else you want to fill in.
You're measuring yourself by that 9-year-old little girl.
Right. That's one of the old wounds that came out of that situation. So when I recognized that I was the one putting myself into burnout, I realized I need to set some healthy boundaries. And what is a boundary? And they're self boundaries. They're guidances for me. I had to really feel into my own system and start to recognize when I was feeling overwhelmed, when I needed to say no, when I needed to step back and pause and take a break, and that my worth had nothing to do with my productivity. It isn't taking care of everybody else. I needed to take care of me.
And I think as a woman, we tend to take on way more than we need to or should in many situations. And you add on to that the grief and the old wounds, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah. So turn this to when my dad died. I was the executor of his estate. And so I was having to actively mourn, but yet carry out a whole lot of responsibility and feel like I needed to take care of all of my siblings. So you can see how I was put right back into that role of that 9-year-old little girl of this is your responsibility to take care of all these people under you and take care of the estate and the financial affairs and different things like that. And if I had not known that that was an old wound, I would have probably really sunk under the burnout.
Oh, you had been totally overwhelmed.
Yeah. But I knew myself and my habits. It didn't, instead of compounding my grief and making it worse because I was not taking care of myself, I chose to implement self-care quickly and learn to say no, or learn to pace myself, or learn to know what needs to be taken care of now and what needs to be taken care of later. I was really able to be on guard for those things so that I didn't allow that old wound to surface.
Well, fortunately, you knew that of yourself, but you take a woman who's recently lost her husband, and this is all taking her by surprise.
Yeah. And so that's where we come in. At Tessie Pearl, we really want to help women know themselves. And you've already been cracked open and feel like you're bleeding all over the place due to the grief of the loss. And you've got these old wounds that are compounding the grief. And so if we can start dissecting that and helping you become more self-aware as a woman, then you're so much more free to act and be who you want to be. Because instead of repeating habits and behaviors that that are hurting you actually and hurting other people, you're able to recognize, this is something that I don't want to engage in again. Let's take a step back. Let's start a new habit. Let's start a new thought processes.
So it's just being more aware and alert to your thoughts, your feelings, and recognizing.
And it releases you. You feel so much more free.
I imagine.
Yeah. And the stress, the burden, and the load that you carry from those old wounds, it's not just rewriting thought processes. You've got to express the emotion and grieve the old wound.
Sure. I
had to grieve that I had to grow up. I had to acknowledge and physically face the things that I minimized, because initially I was, this is just how life was. This is what happens and you just have to take care of it and you power through. And I had to go, no, actually, that's really tragic that happened to you. And it's really sad and it was really hard. And face that and feel it so that then I could work through it. And then I had to dig into the thought processes of don't take on this much and you matter, don't minimize yourself. So women have the opportunity to do that. And that's what we want to provide
and that's
for
beautiful.
Our widows.
That's lovely.
Yeah. So if any of this resonates with you, if you are aware of some of your old wounds, if you're starting to notice them, we invite you to start to pay attention to your behaviors, to the thought processes that you have. Ask us questions, leave some comments. And if you would like some coaching through any of this, look up our coaching at tessiepearl.com.
We're on social media at Tessie Pearl Community. We appreciate comments. Please subscribe and thank you for joining us today.